Let's say you're outside clicking some photos with your good old DSLR and suddenly some random dude pops in with a mirrorless camera and he's like, dude, still shooting with the DSLR? So old school. The future is mirrorless, bro. Are so SLR. Damn. Look at this film camera. So old school. And you're like, what's the main difference between a DSLR and a mirrorless camera? What's the hype? Well, the question is here. Let's jump into the answer. Intro. We don't have any. No, we have one. Talking about a mirrorless and a DSLR, what's the main differences, what the hype all about, DSLR or mirrorless? DSLR is for you, mirrorless is for better, the future is mirrorless and what not. Talking with a mirrorless camera in my hand because I have a DSLR camera filming this video and I don't have another DSLR to be sitting with me here. By DSLR, we are meant that digital single lens reflex camera. In the old days, we used single lens reflex camera as in the SLR cameras, which used films to capture the footages, where DSLRs replaced the film by a digital sensor. That is the main difference between an SLR and a DSLR. So, what is a mirrorless camera? Mirrorless camera has the same working method but without that mirror. So there's no reflection in the camera. Everything goes directly to the sensor. Moving on to the basic differences, first of all comes the size. The size. Mirrorless cameras are usually smaller than the DSLR cameras because it doesn't have those mirror and reflection components in the body, so it's easier to make them in a compact size. Back in the days, mirrorless cameras were really small in size, differentiating with the DSLR, but nowadays, with the release of Sony A7, other Lumix series cameras, the difference is going low day by day because DSLRs were easy to grip by hand, easy to use with larger lenses as lenses are going larger, and mirrorless cameras are going better onwards. DSLR cameras was always in the shape to have a better grip from the first invention of it maybe, but mirrorless cameras had a different perspective that it has to be smaller with a smaller form factor and less buttons. But things are going changed. Newer mirrorless cameras are better to grip on and having bigger bodies. For instance, my A6000, a 2014 camera maybe, is so small in size that anyone who sees this would say, dude, what is this toy? What are you doing with it? And there are other beast cameras like Sony A6600 and 6400 and so on, better than some bigger DSLR cameras in some perspectives, but still very little in size, because all we know is the bigger the camera, the better it does. Like the 1DX Mark II or III, a huge camera, rectangular shape, a professional body. Yeah, it does good, but this thing is a 24 megapixel camera with a video capabilities of 1080p in 60 frames per second at 50 mbps. So going for an interchangeable lens camera, as mirrorless cameras are evolving day by day, it is heard that mirrorless cameras are way better in focusing than DSLR. But this is actually a debatable question because in the first era, mirrorless cameras had only the contrast detection focus, which was the same sensor as its imaging sensor, and the contrast detection focusing method was quite slow because it just differentiated between different contrasts, so it would go up and down and then again to the most contrast point to fix its focusing. This was a slower but more precise method because it used the image sensor with it, so you see it is what you get in the picture. DSLRs used face detection focusing, which was another focusing sensor light below the imaging sensor, where the main light through the lens would go to the viewfinder via the printer prism and a part of light would go to the focusing sensor. The method of face detection was faster but not that precise because that was not in the image sensor, so there was some percentage of getting a blurry image. With days going ahead, by evolving, nowadays mirrorless cameras uses contrast detection and face detection both in their focusing main system by their image processor, so they are fast and accurate at the same time. This hybrid method of focusing system made these mirrorless cameras a beast in autofocus. But DSLRs are also not stepping behind. They also integrated the face detection and contrast detection system in their image processor, like Canon introduced their dual pixel autofocus CMOS system. Another main difference between a DSLR and a mirrorless camera is the viewfinder. Mirrorless cameras uses EVFs, as in the electronic viewfinder. The DSLRs use the optical printer prism viewfinder, where you see what actually it is, and mirrorless cameras would show you from what it receives to the image sensor and then puts in the display. So you'll get an advantage of this EVF because you see what you're capturing, so you can easily check for the exposure and all the other things. If you're using a manual focus, you can use your focus peaking if it's present in your camera and other zebras to correct your proper exposure and so on. But EVFs are not as accurate as the pictures. Usually it shows 1 or 2 stops more contrast than the picture really is. Then again, it has some lags when you're doing sports photography or something. You may face some lags moving the camera with your subject, but it's getting better day by day thanks to faster refresh rates and a higher quality display here. And now even there are 5 million dots in the display of an EVF, so it's getting better day by day. But some photographers may never choose EVF because there are a lot of drawbacks for that. Because it has no lags, they can actually see what the lens is seeing, and obviously that's optical. I got really used to with this EVF because I can control whatever the settings I need to change, like white balance and everything, because I can see them right in my eyes, and changing these settings with a better picture every time becomes so easy for me. There another drawback for optical viewfinder, because every time you click a shot, the mirror opens up for the sensor and blocks the view of your camera, so you cannot see via the viewfinder when the camera is taking a picture. So it really comes to the personal preferences whether you like a EVF or you're better off with the optical viewfinder. One thing's been going with these mirrorless cameras are the batteries are really bad in performance. You just get an hour or something to shoot with this, whereas DSLRs offer you a whole day of shooting with a single battery. This was because mirrorless cameras were meant to be smaller. They had to put smaller batteries in it, but day by day batteries are getting better and mirrorless cameras are going bigger, and from Sony's Z series batteries really give a great performance, more like a DSLR. For my A6000 I carry a couple of batteries because they ran out so fast, but being smaller batteries you can charge most of the DSLR batteries from your power bank or something, because a USB or USB-C port system is usually integrated in this, and usually the batteries would last less than a DSLR because mirrorless cameras has more electronic components in them. They have to always turn on the image sensor to show you in the display or the viewfinder, and there are more systems in some high-end cameras like the in-body 5-axis image stabilizer, so they have to move some motors and stuff in it to keep it powered, and that drains a lot of juice out of it. An introduction with the Canon RF series, it denotes that mirrorless is or may be actually the future. Having different options and going with the personal preferences, whether you need it or not, both have drawbacks and better sides. But when it comes to video, things are getting interesting. Nikon D90 introduced HD video to the DSLR cameras, and with the introduction of the 5D Mark II, DSLRs were starting to evolve into professional videography and filmmaking. Well, that was back in the day. Now Sony has led the way with high-end oversampled 4K videos with their mirrorless cameras. And even with their full-frame A7 series like the Sony A7 Mark III, A9, and there are many great cameras when it comes to videography in mirrorless range. The Fujifilm, the Panasonic Lumix series are just top-notch filmmaking cameras. The newly released Fuji X-T4 is a crop sensor camera having the capability of recording a 4K video in 50 or 60 FPS, which is one of a kind in its price. And you may have heard about the Panasonic GH5 and S1H, especially because they are nearly competing some film cameras out there. You see, when it comes to DSLR, these cameras were invented mainly to be used in photography because we had the optical viewfinder, we had to put the camera in our eyes to see what the camera is seeing, but in videography or filmmaking case is different, and this case totally goes with this mirrorless series because they show you directly from the sensor itself to its display or EVF. There is no other focusing system needed. Everything goes into the sensor, shows in the display. You can use it down or up, but time to time DSLRs are also evolving. They now have sensor to display system for their videographing use, so the choice is hard to make. Till now, for videographing purposes, the mirrorless cameras are stepping ahead of DSLR cameras. Another thing is mirrorless cameras introduced silent shutter because they had no moving particles in the camera, so they can easily and silently capture the photos where you need to be really quiet. Some DSLRs may show you the function, but they don't work good as a mirrorless camera would do. But DSLRs are not lagging behind. Say the Canon EOS 90D, a DSLR which can simply do anything a mirrorless camera would do, right down to live view, autofocus and video capabilities. And in early 2020, Nikon released their D780, a DSLR that takes the live view and autofocus system from their Z series, to be exact the Nikon Z6, to offer all the technical advantages of a mirrorless camera to that. So whether if the mirrorless cameras are the future or not, the DSLR cameras are also getting better. The companies are releasing it every year with better technologies, competing with other mirrorless cameras because the consumers are still buying them. And some says DSLRs are more rigid and more weatherproof, but mirrorless cameras are also evolving in that case too. The Nikon Z series has alloy body and weatherproof sealing, so the main line between the DSLR and mirrorless are getting blurred out. Whether if you're having a mirrorless camera or a DSLR camera, that doesn't make you a better photographer or cinematographer. It all takes in yourself. You're the one who's making the gear. Use your creativity. Your camera is way better than you think you. And before buying any camera, whether it's mirrorless or DSLR, check the features if they goes with you or not. Hope this helped you to differentiate between a mirrorless and a DSLR camera for your next buying decision. I'm Raj with you. I'll be back with you soon. Spread the positivity and stay safe. Peace. What would be the next video? Maybe the A6000 review. This is a good one.